professor here at the University of Denver Stern College of Law. Now, Denver, let's talk for a second. It is no secret that our country has some tremendous challenges in front of it. Challenges like eliminating the tremendous income and wealth inequality that gets worse. Challenges like stopping the climate change that threatens to destroy our planet. Like creating a world where the first option is always diplomacy and not war. And challenges like creating a country where there's meaningful opportunity and real inclusion for everyone, regardless of the color of your skin, the country of your birth, your gender, your disability, or who you love. Now, these are just some of the important issues we face as a nation in this upcoming presidential election. But we all know that we are not going to solve them with the same old tired solutions and the same old tired rhetoric and the same old empty promises. What we don't need is more inertia, more inaction, and more indecision. Is new voices, a bold new vision, new leadership that's not afraid to speak truth to power. Now, lucky for us, turns out in this election, we have a candidate who has the courage to say what has to be said and to do what needs to be done. Now, whether it's the fight to protect workers' rights to organize a union, or to fix our broken immigration system, or to end the disgrace of the mass incarceration of African Americans. Or even to overturn the Citizens United case. Champion who will, with our continued support, lead the political revolution that we need to transform our nation. Denver, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the next President of the United States.
that wonderful introduction. Let me thank all the folks up at the atrium, and let me thank the many hundreds in the lacrosse field. Thank you all very much for being here tonight. You know, this is an extraordinary turnout, and I thank all of you for being here. A few weeks ago, we decided we were going to do an event in LA, and I said to my staff, look, we're going to LA. Why don't we see if we can get a room in Denver? And let's see if we can, bring a couple of hundred people together. See if we can find some supporters. And after about 10 minutes after the email went out, we knew we had to change the venue. And here we are tonight. Let me begin by telling you what no other candidate for president is going to tell you. And that is that this campaign is not about me, it's not about Hillary Clinton, it's not about Jeb Bush, it's not about any other candidate. This campaign is about you, your kids, and your parents. It is about creating a political movement of millions of people who stand up and loudly and proudly proclaim that this nation and our government belong to all of us and not just a handful of billionaires. People throughout our history have fought and died to defend democracy. And democracy means today that we need a political movement of millions of people who come out and vote, who educate, and who organize. Democracy is not about the last election in which 63% of the American people and 80% of young people did not vote. That's not democracy. Democracy is when people from one end of this country to the other stand up and say that there is nothing that a great nation cannot accomplish. Now is not the time for thinking small. We have been thinking small for too many years. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Now is the time to think big and to understand all that we can accomplish for all of our people. This country today, in my view, faces more serious problems than at any time since the Great Depression. And if you add to that the planetary crisis of climate change, it may well be that today, in our time, we face more challenges than any time in the modern history of this country. And what we are here tonight for is to lay those problems out on the table and to talk about how, in fact, we are going to solve those problems. Today we live, as I mentioned, in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, but most Americans don't feel that and don't know that. And the reason for that is that almost all of the wealth rests in the hands of a tiny number of people. America now has more income and wealth inequality than any major country on earth, and the gap between the very, very rich and everyone else is wider today than at any time since the late 1920s. In my view, the issue of wealth and income inequality is the great moral issue of our time. It is the great economic issue of our time. It is the great political issue of our time. Let me be as clear as I can be. There is something profoundly wrong when the top 1/10 of 1% today owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. There is something profoundly wrong when today 99% of all new income created goes to the top 1%. There is something profoundly wrong when we have seen a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires at the same time as millions of Americans are working longer hours for lower wages, and we have by far the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. There is something profoundly wrong when one family in America, the Walton family, owns more wealth than the bottom 130 million Americans. This grotesque level of wealth and income inequality is not only immoral, is not only bad economics, is not only unsustainable, it is not what the United States of America is supposed to be about. And you know what? Together we're going to change that. It ain't going to be easy. Billionaire class controls much of the economy. They control much of our political life. They control much of the media. But what we are doing tonight is sending a message to the billionaire class, and that is, you can't have it all. You cannot get huge tax breaks when children in this country go hungry. You cannot continue to send our jobs to China when millions of people in this country are desperately looking for work. You cannot hide your profits in the Cayman Islands and in other tax havens while there are massive unmet needs on every corner of this country. The unquestionable greed of the billionaire class is destroying this nation, and it has got to end. These extraordinarily wealthy and powerful people is you cannot take advantage of all of the benefits of America if you refuse to accept your responsibilities as Americans. But when we talk about our economy, we're not just talking about the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. What we are also talking about is the tragic reality that over the last 40 years, not 6 years, not 10 years, but over the last 40 years, the great middle class of America, once the envy of the world, has been disappearing. And I want you to appreciate this, because we don't talk about it quite often enough. All of you are aware that in recent years we have seen an explosion of technology. And all of you are aware that almost every worker in America is now far more productive than workers were 10 or 20 years ago. And yet, despite that increase in technology and the increase in productivity, the fact of the matter is that millions of people are working longer hours for low wages, and median family income today is almost $5,000 less than it was in 1999. That is the reality, and that's the reality that we have got to put on the table, and we have got to discuss that, and we have got to turn that around. I can tell you that in my state of Vermont, and I doubt that it is any different in Colorado or any place else, we have people who are not working one job, they're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs, trying to cobble together an income and some health care. That is not what the American economy should be about. So when we talk about the economy, and when you ask people what's on their mind, they talk about jobs and unemployment. So let me just tell you this. When you read in the papers once a month that real unemployment, or that official unemployment in America is 5.4%, don't believe it. Because the way the government determines unemployment rates is kind of complicated. If you throw in the fact that we have millions of people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time, and when you add to that the millions of people who have given up looking for work, real unemployment today is close to 11%. And let me tell you something else which is not discussed at all. And one of the fun things about running for president is you can talk about the issues that other people don't talk about. A report just came out a few weeks ago from the Economic Policy Institute, which is an excellent think tank in Washington. And what they said should scare every single American. And that is that youth unemployment in this country has reached crisis proportions. If you include those people who have given up looking for work, people working part-time, young people working part-time, when they want to work full-time, if you're looking at high school graduates from age 17 to 20, the unemployment rate for white and Hispanic young people is over 30%, and for young African American kids 17 to 20, that number is 51%. Now maybe, just maybe, we should start investing in jobs and education rather than incarceration and exams. When we talk about the economy, we're also not just talking about income and wealth inequality. We're not just talking about unemployment. We are talking about wages. And what we're talking about is that millions and millions of people in Vermont, in Colorado, all across this country are working at totally inadequate wages. I was in Des Moines, Iowa, a week ago, talking to some people, and what they were at a farmer's market. And what they were doing, they were a church-related organization, they were collecting food that was not sold at the farmer's market and donating it to an emergency food shelf. And what they said is in Des Moines, and I expect it is true all over this country, 90% of the people who went to those emergency food shelves were people who were working and working full time. One would think that if somebody worked full time, you would earn enough to be able to feed your family. And let me state as clearly as I can that the current federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage and must be raised to a living wage. City of Los Angeles, a couple of weeks ago, did exactly the right thing. They raised the minimum wage. They raised the minimum wage over a period of a couple of years to $15 an hour, and that's what we can do nationally. And when we talk about work, and when we talk about wages, we have got to end the disgrace of women making 78 cents on the dollar. We need pay equity for women workers in this country. Equal pay for equal work. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I announced a series of proposals that were a lot of fun to talk about, and I'll tell you why. As you know, many Republicans talk about family values. Oh, they just love families. And they just love children. They just can't get enough of families and children. But when they talk about family values, you all know what they're talking about. What they are saying to every woman in this country, you cannot control and have destiny over your own body. What they are saying to women, and this is quite incredible, hard to imagine, that women cannot buy the contraceptives they want. they are saying to our gay brothers and sisters is, you cannot get married. Well, I have, and I think you have, a very different vision of what family values should be about. Let me tell you what I think family values mean. It means that the United States must end our international embarrassment of being the only major country on earth, the only one, which does not guarantee workers paid medical and family leave. Which does not guarantee paid sick time or paid vacation time. Now, let me tell you about a family value as deep and as strong as one can imagine. Today in America, a working class or low-income woman gives birth to a baby. And that mom and that father want the opportunity to get to know their newborn baby. That is pretty natural, and that is what a family is all about. But if that working class woman does not have enough money, she will have to go back to work in 4 days, 5 days, 1 week time. And that is why we need family and medical leave, which says to that mom and that dad, you have 1 month to spend with your baby paid for. This is not a radical socialistic idea. This is an idea that exists in virtually every major country on earth. And let me tell you about another radical idea. Are you ready? I don't know about you, but I go around the country and I end up eating in a lot of restaurants. And I do not want somebody preparing the food who has the flu, who is sick. I want to see workers in this country be guaranteed paid sick leave. Something else that nobody talks about. And that is, with the collapse of the American middle class, what has happened is that our people, men and women, are being forced to work incredibly long hours. I hope some of you know that our people in this country, the wealthiest country on earth, end up working far more hours than do the people of any major industrialized country.
60 a week.
The American people are working 137 hours a year more than the Japanese, who work very hard. We work 260 more hours than the British, and well, for the French, we work almost 500 hours a year more than our friends in France. Now, why do I say that? Is that an important issue? It is a very important issue. And you know why it is? Because our people are working incredibly long hours. Here's a story. I was in a grocery store, outside of a grocery store in Burlington, Vermont, a few years ago. All right. And a woman came up, and she said, you know, Bernie, I just want to mention something to you. My husband and I have one kid. We would like to have more children. But I'm working 3 jobs, he's working 2 jobs, and we don't believe that we can be the kind of parents that we want to be. And that story is being told all across our country. People are exhausted. Some of you may remember and read in your history books that 100 years ago, in the early 1900s, workers demonstrated all over this country, and they held up banners, and they held up signs and posters, and they said 100 years ago, we are not beasts of burden, we are human beings, we want leisure time, we want to spend time with our kids, we want more education, we want the 40-hour work week. Brothers and sisters, 100 years have come and gone. We have seen an explosion in technology and a huge increase in worker productivity. We are not today even close to a 40-hour work week. Today, 85% of working men and 66% of working women work more than 40 hours a week. In my view, at the very least, what we have got to do as a family value is to guarantee those workers at least 2 weeks a year of paid vacation. Imagine that radical idea that workers should have a couple of weeks where parents can spend some quality time with their kids. And again, all over the industrialized world, they don't have 2 weeks. In fact, they usually have a lot more than that of paid vacation. All right, let me talk. When pollsters go out and they poll the American people, and they say, what is uppermost on your mind? What are you caring about the most? The answer is almost always a 4-letter word, J-O-B-S. And people understand that because, as I mentioned earlier, not only is real unemployment close to 11%, youth unemployment off the charts, people are scared to death. If you're 50, 55 years of age, you're worried about walking in to your job and finding that your job has disappeared and a young person has taken it. If you are young, you are desperately trying to find a career ladder, but you can't find your first job. In my view, the time is now to recognize that we do have a jobs crisis in America, that we need a major federal jobs program. Several months ago, I have introduced in the Senate, and we will implement from the White House, a jobs program which rebuilds our crumbling roads, bridges, water systems. This is the United States of America. Our roads and bridges and water systems and levees and dams should not be crumbling. Our rail system should not be behind Europe, Japan, and China. And if we invest $1 trillion in rebuilding that infrastructure, we become more productive, more efficient, safer, and we can create up to 13 million decent paying jobs. And here's another issue that we have got to deal with as a nation. It's not a sexy issue, but it is enormously important. And that is to understand that the trade policies that we have had in this country for decades have been a grotesque failure to the American worker. As a member of the House and now as a senator, I have voted against NAFTA, against CAFTA, against permanent normal trade relations with China. Why? Because I understood, as I believe the vast majority of Americans understood, that the function of these trade agreements was to allow corporate America to shut down in America, outsource our jobs to low-wage countries, and bring their products back in here. In my view, if corporate America wants us to buy their products, the time is long overdue for them to start manufacturing those products here in the United States. That is why I have helped lead the opposition in the Senate to this disastrous Trans-Pacific Partnership. Say a word about the TPP. It's not widely known, and we can go on for a long time. This is what I want to say. It is not just that the TPP and Fast Track would force American workers to compete against people in Vietnam who make 56 cents an hour minimum wage. It's beyond that. And I'll tell you a story which demonstrates what these trade agreements are all about. Involved, an integral part of this trade agreement is called an investor-state resolution process. Okay, what is that about? Right, this is what it's about. Tiny country of Uruguay, a few years ago, had a president who was an oncologist, knew a lot about cancer. And what this guy tried to do, and did do, is work on very strong anti-tobacco legislation, trying to keep the kids of his country from smoking. I think that's a good thing. Woo! Yeah. Given the fact that smoking causes a huge myriad of diseases, I applaud people who do that. Philip Morris, on the other hand, disagreed. What Philip Morris did is a result of trade language, which is included in the TPP, is went to an international tribunal and said to the tribunal, what Uruguay is doing is in violation of our trade agreement because they are harming our future profits. Whoa! That's right. So Philip Morris said, look, we can make a lot of money by addicting children to nicotine and killing them over the years, and you are taking away our ability to hook kids on cigarettes. And what this trade agreement, we'll see how that resolves itself. It's now before a tribunal. Australia is in the same boat. But that tells you everything you need to know about these trade agreements. The bottom line, very clearly, is what is good for future profits is what trade agreements are about, not the health, not our environment, not the well-being of the people, and that is why we've got to defeat salaries. Now let me be as blunt as I can be in telling you, if I haven't been blunt already, and tell you something I think many of you already know. And that is, as a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case. Make that loud so that Supreme Court hears you. By a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court rendered one of the worst decisions in the history of our country. And what they said to the wealthiest people in this country, they said, okay guys, you already own much of America. We're now going to give you the opportunity to own the United States government. And people like the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson, they said, hey, that's great. That's great. It's what we've always wanted to do, to own our government. And what Citizens United allowed is these people to spend billions of dollars to buy candidates who will make the rich richer and everybody else poor. And this issue of campaign finance reform is so important. It's important because it impacts every other issue of concern. If we have a Congress or governors or state legislatures that are owned by the billionaire class, we are not going to address the problems facing working families. I have so far made one promise in this campaign, one clear promise, and that is I will have a litmus test for my nominees to the Supreme Court. And that litmus test is that anybody I nominate will make it clear to this country that they're going to rehear Citizens United and vote to overturn that. I want to see a vibrant American democracy where we're not looking at 63% of the people not voting, we're looking at 90% of the people voting. I want to see a democracy when anybody, regardless of his or her views, who wants to run for office can run for office without being beholden to big money interests. After we overturn through a constitutional amendment the Citizens United, we move to public funding of elections. Brothers and sisters, American democracy, and people did not fight and die for American democracy to allow a situation to arise where the Koch brothers alone, second wealthiest family in America, extremely right-wing family, this family will spend more money on this election cycle than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Brothers and sisters, if you step back and you look at a situation like that, what you are not looking at, you're not looking at a democracy, you are looking at an oligarchic form of government, and we have got to stop it. Being at a university, I now want to touch on another issue of just enormous consequence. In a highly competitive global economy, which is what we are in, we need the best educated workforce in the world. And what that means is that we have got to encourage all of our people, and not just young people, middle-aged people, older people, to get all of the education they can regardless of the income of their family. Think about where we are right now and the absurd situation which currently exists right now in America. In a highly competitive global economy, hundreds of thousands of bright, young, qualified people who want to go to college or get a higher education are unable to do so, not because they lack the ability, but because they lack the money. Now, that is grossly unfair in terms of just taking away the ladder for those young people to make it into the middle class. But it is even worse than that when we look at our nation as a whole. What kind of insanity is it that we say to these people, we don't want you to become scientists or engineers or doctors or nurses because you just don't have the money. And that is why I have introduced legislation and will fight for that legislation as president that will make every public college and university in America tuition free. Let me tell you what that means. It's not only that it's going to make life easier for kids in high school who know that they can go to college. It will permeate all levels of education. Kids right now, I'm sure in Denver and in Burlington, Vermont, who are in the 6th grade, they've gotten the message. Their family doesn't have a lot of money. They ain't going to make it to the middle class. They are not going to go to college. Why should they study hard? Why should they do their homework? But when we make it clear to every kid in this country that in fact if you work hard in school, you will be able to get a higher education, it will transform this nation. Now some people they think this is a radical idea. It is not a radical idea. It is the most common sense idea that we can think of. And let me tell you this, right now, countries like Germany, countries all over Scandinavia, even countries like Chile, they understand that their future rests in investing in their young people. We should do the same thing. When we talk about higher education and higher education financing, we also have to understand that there are millions of young and middle-aged and not so middle-aged people who are today being crushed by horrendous student debt. A young man I know, not so young anymore, graduated law school deeply in debt. Today he is still paying that debt off at 9% interest rates. Now what sense does it make that you could go out and refinance your home today at 2%, 3%? You could buy a new car at 0%, 1%. But because you committed the crime of wanting to get an education, you're stuck for the rest of your lives at 8, 9%. So part of that legislation will allow people who have student debt to refinance their student debt and lower interest rates. And what it also will do is end the absurdity of the federal government making billions in profit off of the interest rates paid by low-income and working-class families. And when we do that, we can substantially cut by more than half interest rates for people who have debt today. Now, my critics have said, well, you know, Bernie, it's an expensive proposition what you're proposing, and they're right. This legislation would cost about $70 billion a year. That's a lot of money. And you know how we are going to pay for it? We're going to pay for it by a tax on Wall Street speculation. result of the fraud, the recklessness of Wall Street, this country was plunged into the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Millions of people lost their jobs, they lost their life savings, and they lost their homes. The time right now is not only to pass a speculation tax on Wall Street, the time right now is to break up the major financial institutions. If a bank is too big to fail, that bank is too big to exist. I suppose that means I won't get much money for my campaign for Wall Street. But we will survive without them. Let me touch now on an issue which I think addresses our responsibilities as human beings, as parents, and I've got 4 kids and 7 beautiful grandchildren, and that is that we have the moral responsibility to make sure that the planet that we leave to our kids and grandchildren is habitable. The debate is over, maybe with the exception of Fox Television. But other than that, the scientists have almost unanimously told us that A, climate change is real, B, it is caused by human activity and the emissions of carbon, C, it is already causing devastating problems here in our country and around the world. And this is what they have also told us. They have said that while the problems are very serious right now, they will only get much, much worse if we don't seize a short window of opportunity to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel into energy efficiency. Scientific community tells us, and this is really speaks to our responsibilities as custodians of this planet. What they say is if we continue business as usual, if we do not transform our energy system, that by the end of this century, the planet Earth will be between 5 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. And what that will mean is more and more drought, more flooding, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels. It will also be a huge national security issue for the entire world, because when people do not have land to grow food on, if they do not have water for agriculture or to drink, there will be migrations of people, there will be international conflict, there will be more and more war. The point is, and the Pope Francis made this point just beautifully. And what a hero for this entire planet. Pope Francis has been. That we have one of the important religious leaders on earth speaking out in a way that nobody in Congress would ever speak out about what money and inequality is doing to people all over the world, and now speaking out on climate change. God bless Pope Francis. When I was in college, way back when, a few years ago, the issue that motivated young people all across this country was civil rights. And at that point, we had folks giving up their lives fighting in the South to desegregate the South, to fight for voting rights for African Americans. And some of those heroes got killed trying to do what they did. In my view today, one of the great issues facing our younger generation is to stand up and demand that America leads the world in transforming our energy system. And when we do that, by the way, when we weatherize our homes that are leaking energy, when we have a transportation system that is energy efficient, when we have a strong rail system, when we move aggressively to solar, wind, geothermal, we create millions of jobs as well. Let me say a word about another issue that we have got to finally deal with. The United States, shamefully, is the only major nation on earth that does not guarantee health care to all of our people as they run. My state of Vermont, borders on Canada. All people have health care in Canada as a right. Germany, Scandinavia, Austria, every European country has health care for all of their people as a right. Today in America, despite the modest gains of the Affordable Care Act, we have 35 million people without health insurance. We have even more who are underinsured with large deductibles and co-payments. What we have got to do, in my view, is pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. No sense. 35 million people uninsured, more underinsured. Our healthcare outcomes are not particularly good. We have a higher infant mortality rate than many other countries. We have a lower life expectancy than many other countries, and yet we end up paying almost twice as much per capita for healthcare. And that is why we got to get the private insurance companies out of healthcare. The ranking member, which means leader of the opposition in the Senate, on the Budget Committee. And I want to say a word about the Republican budget that passed last month, and I'm going to tell you this because the media forgot to talk about it.
Convenient.
And it's important that we talk about it for the following reason. I am perhaps the most progressive member of the United States Senate. It shouldn't be surprising that I have disagreements with all Republicans on almost every issue. But this is what the Republican budget did. And the reason I raise that to you is I don't mind, as the most progressive member of the Senate, being opposed by the billionaire class and all of their friends. I accept their hatred with joy. Because if they hate me and what I stand for, then I know I'm doing something right. But this is what I do not accept with joy, and that is too many working class, middle class people continue to vote against their own best interests. Now, I want to say to the Republicans in Colorado, I want them to tell me whether they think this budget of the Republicans makes sense. And here it is. 35 million people without any health insurance. What the Republican budget did is throw an additional 27 million people off of health insurance. And when I ask, as I do, my Republican colleagues, when you throw 27 million people off of health insurance, how many of them will die? How many of them will become much sicker than they would have been if they had insurance? There is no response. So I say to my Republican friends here, working people in Colorado, you tell me if it is a good idea that millions of men, women, and children are thrown off of health insurance. We talked about tonight the fact that working class, middle class families are finding it harder and harder to pay for a college education for their kids. What the Republican budget did over a 10-year period was cut Pell Grants by $90 billion. And I say to Republicans here in Colorado and across this country, families that are struggling to send their kids to college, whether they think it makes sense to make massive cuts in the most important federal aid program for college students. The Republican Party, in their budget, at a time when millions of families are struggling to feed their kids, made massive cuts in nutrition programs. Do my Republican friends here in Colorado think that kids should go hungry in America? I don't think they do. I really don't think that they do. And furthermore, we've had a number of Republican candidates for president who want to cut Social Security, cut Medicaid. So what our job is to get the word out to our Republican friends to stop voting for the billionaire class, start voting for themselves. We can do these things and more. We can create the greatest nation that anyone has ever seen. If we stand together, if we do not let people divide us by race, by whether we were born in America or born in Mexico, whether we're gay or whether we're straight. So I look forward to working with you all in creating the political revolution that this country needs. Thank you all very much.